My name is Teresa Bennett, and I'm 30 years old. Just a few days ago, my father destroyed our entire holiday tradition with a single voicemail message. His voice sounded completely flat, almost bored when he told me, "Thanksgiving is canceled. Expect to hear from my attorney soon." There was no greeting, no explanation whatsoever. Just a legal threat dropped on me like a bomb exploding on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. A few years back, I would have immediately called him in tears, desperately begging to understand what terrible thing I had done wrong. I would have scrambled frantically to fix whatever it was so nobody would stay angry at me anymore. But this time around, things played out very differently. I didn't argue or plead with him. Instead, I simply stared at my phone screen for a brief moment, typed the single word "understood," and placed my device face down on the table in front of me. I didn't scream or cry. I opened my laptop instead. For the past 6 years, my name has been legally tied to a $253,000 mortgage on a house where I don't actually live. This is the same house my parents absolutely love bragging about to everyone they know, yet somehow they've never managed to pay for it without constantly requiring my financial help along the way. While they posted happy family pictures on social media and complained endlessly about their bills, I was quietly making the monthly payments that kept their electricity running and their lights turned on. That same afternoon, right after receiving that threatening voicemail from my father, I called the bank directly and asked them a straightforward question about what would actually happen if I requested to remove my name from their loan agreement. The bank representative pulled up our file, carefully confirmed that I was the primary reason their mortgage application had been approved in the first place, and then informed me that they would need to review my parents' finances all over again from scratch. Despite understanding the serious implications, I signed the removal paperwork anyway. Just 36 hours later, my phone suddenly lit up with 49 missed calls and a terrified, almost panicked message from their attorney, who is now suddenly desperate to speak with me immediately. That's exactly what happened when my father canceled Thanksgiving, and I decided to change the one thing he never imagined I would actually dare to touch. For weeks before that devastating voicemail arrived, I had been sitting at my parents' dining room table out in the suburbs, absently pushing green beans around on my plate while my mother talked on and on about how incredibly tight their finances had been lately. Karen, my mom, had perfected that dramatic sigh she always uses right before she's about to ask me for something important. She said to me, "Teresa, we really need to talk about Thanksgiving plans this year," as she set her fork down carefully like she was delivering serious medical test results to a patient. My father, Paul, kept cutting his steak methodically, deliberately not looking in my direction at all. "We've gone ahead and booked a beautiful cabin up in Minnesota for this year," she continued. "It's going to be such a really special trip for all of us. But unfortunately, the place is quite small, with only enough room to accommodate 4 people comfortably." I blinked at her several times, not quite understanding where this conversation was heading yet. "For people," I repeated slowly, trying to process what she was actually telling me. She nodded her head quickly, her eyes dropping down to focus on her napkin in her lap. "So it'll be me, your father, your brother Kevin, and his new girlfriend making the trip. You understand the situation, right? There's simply not enough space available for everyone to come along." At the other end of the table, my younger brother Kevin was leaning way back in his chair, casually scrolling through his phone like absolutely none of this conversation had anything to do with him whatsoever. Paul finally looked up directly at me and added, "Besides, you're always so busy with your work obligations anyway. This will actually give you some valuable time to catch up on everything." I felt my cheeks getting uncomfortably hot. "You mean catch up on paying the bills I've been covering for this house?" I tried my best to keep my voice level and calm, but the words came out considerably sharper than I had originally planned. My mom frowned deeply at me like I had just broken some sacred, unspoken family rule. "Teresa, please don't start with this right now," she said firmly. "You know perfectly well that we're grateful for your help." Though honestly, I genuinely couldn't remember the last actual time either one of them had bothered to say thank you to me for anything. I listed everything out loud anyway, more for my own benefit than for theirs at this point. "I've been sending money every single month specifically for the mortgage payment. I've covered the electric bill multiple times when it was seriously past due. I even paid off Kevin's entire credit card balance when he maxed it out on what he called emergencies, which turned out to be nothing but DoorDash food deliveries and expensive video games. I took a breath and continued, and now there's suddenly money available for a holiday trip, yet somehow I'm the only family member who didn't receive an invitation to join you. Kevin finally glanced up briefly from his phone, rolling his eyes dramatically at me. Family is supposed to help family, he said dismissively. You make way more money than the rest of us do anyway. Why are you acting like such a victim about this whole thing? I wanted to laugh out loud at the absurdity. They all talked about my professional job like it was some silly little side hobby that didn't really matter. But the very minute they desperately needed money from somewhere, I mysteriously transformed into their personal bailout fund that never ran dry. I make enough income to cover my own life and expenses, I said clearly. I don't make enough to bankroll 4 fully grown adults indefinitely. Paul set his fork down hard enough on the table to make all the plates vibrate noticeably. You live completely alone in a tiny apartment downtown, he said accusingly. You don't have any kids to support. You don't have any real responsibilities weighing you down at all. Posting random things on the internet for some trendy startup company is hardly what anyone would call backbreaking work. We certainly didn't raise you to nickel and dime your own family members over money. That particular comment stung far more than I wanted to admit to myself. My actual job in content strategy had literally kept their fancy suburban house from going into default more than once over the years. But to him, it would always be just a hobby, never a real career worth respecting. My mother gave me that deeply disappointed look she absolutely loves using. This is exactly why we made the decision not to tell you about the trip sooner, she said. You always make absolutely everything about money and unnecessary drama. I stared at her, genuinely stunned by what I was hearing. I make it about money, I repeated very slowly, making sure I understood correctly. I make it about money because I'm the only person in this family treating money like it's actually real and matters. The room went completely quiet for a beat, filled with that kind of heavy, uncomfortable silence where everyone mentally digs in and firmly chooses their side in the conflict. Kevin simply shrugged his shoulders and went right back to staring at his phone. Paul leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms defensively across his chest. If you honestly cannot be happy for us taking one single trip without you coming along, maybe you should just sit this particular holiday out anyway, he declared. We'll figure out how to handle the bills ourselves. We always manage to do it somehow. That statement was the part that hurt the most, because deep down I knew with absolute certainty it was a complete lie. They never actually figured anything out on their own. Instead, they called me repeatedly. They guilt me relentlessly. They used powerful words like sacrifice and family loyalty until I finally opened my banking app and moved numbers around to patch up the holes they had carelessly punched in their own sinking ship. On the drive back to my apartment that night, with highway lights smearing across my windshield, I realized something that made my stomach twist uncomfortably. It wasn't simply that I hadn't been invited to their Thanksgiving celebration. The much deeper truth was that I had never really been invited to be part of the family, at least not as an actual daughter they loved and valued. I had only been invited as a convenient solution to their ongoing financial problems. I didn't know it then, sitting in my car feeling hurt and angry, but that dinner was actually the last time I would ever walk out of their house feeling completely powerless and trapped. The next time they pushed me too far, I wasn't going to send them more money, like always. Instead, I was going to pull something critically important back from them. A week after that uncomfortable dinner, I was on my lunch break at the office, mindlessly scrolling through Instagram, desperately trying to forget how weird and tense things had felt at my parents' house. That's precisely when I saw it appear on my screen. A bright, perfectly filtered photo popped up right at the top of my feed, showing my dad, my mom, my brother, and his girlfriend, all bundled up together in matching flannel shirts, standing in front of a big rustic log cabin under a decorative banner that said, "Happy Thanksgiving." The caption read cheerfully, "So incredibly grateful for this time away with my favorite people. Family is everything." My thumb froze completely over the screen. Favorite people. Family is everything. There was a strange roaring sound in my ears for a second, almost like I had stepped underwater suddenly. I zoomed in carefully on the photo just to make absolutely sure I wasn't missing something important, some clue that this was a different trip, a different weekend, anything but what it so clearly was. But it wasn't anything else. This was the cabin. This was the exact holiday I had been told there was no available space for me to join. And there they all were, smiling brightly like a stock photo representing the perfect American family, while the person who was actually paying their mortgage sat alone in an office break room eating a sad salad for lunch. A notification suddenly dropped down over the picture on my screen. It was a text message from Kevin that read, "Hey, can you send like $135? We're running low on gas money driving back home, and my card is being weird right now. Signal is absolutely trash out here, so Venmo it quick, please." I stared at his message for a long time without moving. There was no polite greeting. No thank you whatsoever for the last emergency expense I had covered for him. Not even a basic attempt to pretend this was a genuine one-time thing. Just a straightforward demand disguised poorly as an innocent favor between siblings. I typed a response, then deleted it, then retyped something different. Finally, I sent back, "I can't help you this time. I hope you all had fun on the trip." 3 little dots appeared on the screen like he was going to argue with me, but then they suddenly vanished. No reply ever came. A couple of days later, I opened Facebook and immediately saw that my mom had posted a long, emotional status update. It said, "Sometimes the people you sacrifice the most for are the first ones to abandon you completely, but at the end of the day, real family sticks together through everything. The rest of them, well, they show their true colors eventually." The post included heart emojis, praying hand symbols, and a picture of a fall wreath hanging on our old front door. The comments poured in rapidly from friends and extended family. "You deserve so much better, Karen. Kids today just don't understand loyalty anymore. You and Paul are amazing parents. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." I didn't have to ask who exactly they were talking about in these comments. I scrolled slowly through the entire thread, feeling my face go hot and numb at the same time. They had deliberately cut me out of their holiday celebration, and then they had painted themselves as the victims to an audience that didn't know any better. In their carefully crafted version of events, I was the cold, selfish daughter who had walked away for absolutely no good reason. Nobody could see the bank transfers clearly labeled mortgage, utilities, late fee. Nobody saw the text message threads full of, "Can you spot me just this once?" and "I promise I'll pay you back soon," that never turned into anything real. For the first time in my life, instead of just swallowing it all and staying quiet, I did something completely different. I took screenshots of everything. The Instagram post with a caption about favorite people. The gas money text from Kevin. My mom's passive-aggressive status update. Every single time I saw my name pop up in a guilt-soaked message, every time they turned my help into an expectation, I carefully saved it. Then I went back through my banking app history, scrolling past months and years of payments I had faithfully made to keep their entire life from falling apart financially. The numbers formed a clear timeline. There was the month they were so incredibly proud of Kevin going back to school. Then came the month he dropped out again, but somehow upgraded his expensive gaming setup anyway. There was the month my parents said they couldn't breathe under their bills until I wired them just enough money to catch up on everything. Looking at it all in one place like this, it completely stopped feeling like helping my family and started looking like something else entirely. It looked like a pattern. It looked like a trap I had been walking into with my eyes closed over and over again because they kept calling it love. Sitting there on my couch that night with the blue light from my laptop on my face, I realized I was done playing the role they had written for me. The next time they asked for more money, I was not going to open my wallet. I was going to open a door they didn't even remember I held the key to. Once I started seeing the pattern clearly, I could not unsee it. That week, I sat on my couch with my laptop open and my phone next to me, and I treated my own life like a case file. I scrolled back through years of messages, saving every, "Can you help just this once?" and every, "We'll pay you back when things calm down." I took screenshots of bank transfers labeled mortgage, utilities, past due, amounts that would have easily covered a decent vacation of my own if I had ever let myself have one. I grabbed Kevin's texts about his phone bill, his car insurance. That one time his gaming subscription was literally the only thing keeping him sane, apparently. I even replayed old voicemails, the ones I had deleted and then recovered from my backups, where my dad's tone shifted from sweet to sharp in under a minute, if I hesitated to say yes. I dropped all of it into a folder on my desktop and gave it a boring name so no one looking over my shoulder would notice. To anyone else, it was just data. To me, it was proof that I was not crazy, that this had not been a rough year or a phase, but an entire system built on me folding every time they pushed. A couple of nights later, my mom called while I was making dinner. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some old part of me still picked up. She started out soft, asking about my week, my job, if I was eating enough. Then she sighed and said, "Listen, your father, and I just got the property tax notice. It's higher than we expected. We're drowning here, Teresa. We need you to help with this one, just until we get through the holidays." In the background, I could hear the TV and the clink of ice in a glass. I picture my dad in his favorite chair, golf on mute, waiting to see if his script worked again. For the first time, I did not rush to fill the silence. "No," I said, and my own voice surprised me. "I'm not paying it." There was a long pause. "Excuse me," my mom asked. "You heard me," I said. "I've gone back through everything I've covered for you the last few years. Mortgage payments, utilities, emergency this, emergency that. I'm done. I can't keep doing this." Her voice hardened fast. "How dare you keep score?" she snapped. "We're your parents. You wouldn't even have that job, that life, if it weren't for us." In the background, my dad's voice cut in louder. "Put it on speaker." The next thing I knew, he was right there in my ear. "So now you're too good to help your own family," he said. "You think you're some big shot in the city and you can throw us a bone when it makes you feel like a hero and yank it back when you get bored?" I felt my hand shaking, but I kept my tone flat. "I think I've paid enough," I said. "And I think if you two are struggling this much with a house you can't afford without me, maybe you should talk to the bank instead of to me." There was a beat of stunned silence. Then he exploded. "If you're going to turn your back on us, then don't bother showing up for Thanksgiving," he shouted. "You want to see what it looks like when we stop calling? Fine, we'll be done." It was such a familiar threat that it almost didn't land. The difference was that I didn't rush to fix it this time. "Okay," I said quietly. "Then be done." My mom gasped like I had slapped her. My dad muttered something about ingratitude and lawyers and hung up on me. The call ended, but the shaking didn't. I watched my reflection in the dark screen of my TV and saw someone I barely recognized, someone who had finally said no. That night, I pulled out an old email from the bank, the one from when we first signed the mortgage. My name was right there next to my parents', the co-signer with the clean credit score and stable income, the safety net that had made their dream house possible. I read the fine print 3 times. I thought about every time they told me we'll figure it out and then handed the problem to me, and I realized the one thing they never imagined was that I might stop being their safety net. I didn't move on at that second, but the idea settled in my chest like a loaded switch. So when that voicemail finally came, my dad's voice sang, "Thanksgiving is off, you'll be hearing from my lawyer." It didn't hit the way he meant it to. It didn't scare me back into line. It reminded me that I still had one line left to cut, one move they had never prepared for. And this time, instead of reaching for my wallet, I reached for that email. When that voicemail finally landed in my inbox, it felt less like a threat and more like a green light. "Thanksgiving is off. You'll be hearing from my lawyer," my dad said in that clipped, cold tone he loves to use when he thinks he has the upper hand. For a second, I just stared at the notification, my thumb hovering over the play button. Then I hit it, listened all the way through, and felt something inside me quietly click into place. I didn't call him back. I didn't send a long text defending myself. I typed understood, hit send, and opened my laptop like I had rehearsed this 1,000 times. I pulled up the original mortgage email, then logged into my online banking portal and found the customer service chat. A few minutes later, I was on the phone with a woman from the bank, reading off the loan number I knew by heart. She confirmed everything I already suspected. Yes, my name was on the $253,000 mortgage. Yes, my income and credit score were the reason it had been approved. Yes, there was a process to remove a cosigner, but it meant the remaining borrowers would have to qualify on their own. To be completely transparent, she said carefully, based on the last review, it might be challenging for them without your profile attached. I could hear the warning under her professional tone. This could blow up their situation. If you move forward, they may have to refinance or even sell if they can't meet the requirements. I swallowed. Not because I doubted my decision, but because it finally sounded as serious out loud as it had in my head. I understand, I said. Please send me whatever I need to sign. Within an hour, I had electronic documents in my inbox. I read every line twice, not because I didn't trust the bank, but because I wanted to remember what this felt like. For years, every signature from me had been another promise to rescue them. This time, my signature was a promise to myself. I signed, clicked submit, and watched the confirmation screen load. My name was coming off their safety net. The next day around lunch, my phone started buzzing. I was in a meeting, so I flipped it face down and ignored it, assuming it was spam or a wrong number. When I came out an hour later, my lock screen was a wall of missed calls. My dad, my mom, Kevin, an unknown number that turned out to be their attorney. By the end of the afternoon, there were 49 missed calls stacked on top of each other, like they were trying to call their way out of a burning building. One voicemail from the unknown number finally made me hit play. Ms. Bennett, this is Stephen Wright, your parents' attorney. I believe there's been some kind of misunderstanding with the mortgage documents. Your parents are extremely distressed. Please call me back as soon as you can so we can resolve this before the bank takes any further steps. His voice was calm, but there was an edge under it, the kind of panic people get when money and liability are suddenly very real. I didn't call him back either. That night, my dad broke his usual rule about not airing dirty laundry online. He posted a long, vague status about entitled children and betrayal, about how some people weaponize money against the very family that raised them. The comments were as predictable as ever. Friends and extended family rushed in. You too have done everything for your kids. You don't deserve this. Stay strong, Paul. God sees your heart. My phone buzzed with screenshots as people who still liked me sent them over with messages like, "Is this about you? And what's going on?" I stared at his post, at the narrative he was trying to lock in before anyone could see the truth, and realized I didn't have to swallow it this time. I opened the folder on my desktop, the one I had built in the quiet hours when I finally started treating my life like evidence instead of drama. Screenshots of mortgage payments, transfers labeled house payment, and utilities. Kevin's strings of, "Please, just this once." My mom's messages saying they would literally lose the house if I didn't step in. The Instagram cabin photo with my favorite people in the caption. The gas money text that followed her Facebook post about people showing their true colors. All of it lined up into a story that didn't need any commentary from me. I drafted my own post, hand steady. For anyone who's seen recent vague posts about a selfish child abandoning their family, here's what actually happened. I attached the screenshots, redacted account numbers, left the names. I didn't call anyone names. I didn't rant. I just laid out the timeline. Years of payments, last-minute emergencies, the holiday trip I wasn't invited to, the request for more money, the threat about Thanksgiving, the lawyer voicemail after I removed my name from a loan I never should have been on in the first place. Then I hit post and put my phone down. It didn't take long. People who had commented under my dad's status stopped replying. A few deleted comments altogether. A couple of relatives messaged me privately to apologize for assuming. My parents' original post quietly vanished. The only thing that didn't disappear were the calls. My voicemail filled up with my mom crying about how I was ruining them. My dad jumping between rage and pleading. Kevin saying we could fix this if I would just call the bank and sign back on. But this time, I wasn't interested in fixing the version of the story that made them look good. For once, the truth was out, and they were the ones scrambling to clean up the mess. A few days after I dropped the screenshots, my parents finally stopped hiding behind vague posts and voicemails and asked to meet in person. The text from my mom said, "We need to talk face to face. No more social media, please." I picked a neutral spot, a busy coffee shop downtown where nobody could yell without looking crazy, and told them I would meet them there on Saturday afternoon. What I didn't tell them was that I had already made one more call to the one person in our family who still treated me like a human being instead of a walking bank account. When I walked into the cafe, my parents and Kevin were already seated at a table in the corner. My dad had his arms crossed, jaw clenched. My mom's eyes were red like she had cried all morning, and Kevin looked anywhere but at me. I sat down, put my bag on the chair next to me, and waited for someone to start. My dad jumped in first. "This has gone far enough," he said. "You humiliated us online. You blindsided us with the bank. You think you look like a hero, but you're tearing this family apart." My mom leaned forward, voice trembling. "We're about to lose our home, Teresa. Do you understand that? The bank is asking for documents we don't have. They're talking about refinancing, higher payments. We can't afford this without you." There it was, the truth they had never said out loud. I kept my eyes on my coffee. "You mean you can't afford the house you chose, the house you put in my name because you knew I would say yes," I said. "You made your lifestyle depend on my guilt. That's not my fault. That's a choice you made." Kevin finally spoke up, his voice small. "Teresa, look, nobody's saying you didn't help. We know you did, but posting all that stuff, going to the bank behind our backs, you made us look like monsters." I reached into my bag and slid a thin folder onto the table. "I didn't make you look like anything," I said. "You did that on your own." All I did was stop covering it up. Inside were printed copies of the bank transfers, the text messages, the mortgage documents. My dad flipped through them, his face getting redder with each page. "You were keeping records?" he demanded. "What kind of daughter keeps receipts on her own parents?" I met his glare. "The kind who's been told for years that she's overreacting," I said. "The kind who gets called dramatic every time she says no." I needed to see for myself that I wasn't imagining any of this. He slammed the folder shut and shoved it back at me. "You think this is going to hold up in court?" he said. "You think your little narrative is going to impress a judge? We can still talk to our lawyer. We can still make you actually." A calm voice cut in. "You might want to be careful about what you threaten in public." We all turned. Standing by the table, purse on her arm, and reading glasses pushed up on her head, was my grandmother Florence, my mom's mom, the woman they always described as fragile and out of the loop. Whenever I tried to talk to her about money, my mom's mouth fell open. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she stammered. Florence smiled slightly. "Teresa invited me," she said. "And after the folder she sent me last week, I thought it was time I saw things for myself." She pulled out a chair and sat down like she had all the time in the world. My dad tried to regroup. "This is a private family matter," he said stiffly. "We don't need to drag you into this drama." Florence turned to him with a look I had never seen her use on anyone but misbehaving students. "Paul, you dragged me into it the moment you started using my granddaughter as your personal line of credit," she said. I had questions when she mentioned helping out with a few bills. I had a lot more when I saw proof she's been carrying your home for years. My mom shook her head, reaching for her. "It's not like that, Mom. You know, we've always taken care of our kids. Teresa is making it sound worse than it is." Florence pulled a folded set of documents from her bag and placed them on the table beside my folder. "I'm a retired superintendent, not an idiot," she said. "I know what it looks like when someone is being manipulated and then punished for finally standing up for themselves. I also know what it looks like when people think they're entitled to money that's not theirs." My dad eyed the papers. "What is that?" he asked. Florence looked at me first. "I told you on the phone I was going to fix what I could," she said softly. Then she faced my mother. "These are the updated papers for my estate," she said. "The house in Florida, my savings, the little trust your father and I set up. As of last week, everything goes to Teresa. You and Paul are no longer beneficiaries. Kevin isn't either." The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like the air got thicker. My mom's face went pale. "You can't do that," she whispered. "You can't cut us out like that. We're your children." Florence's eyes were sad, but her voice didn't waver. "And she is mine," she said, nodding at me. "I will not leave my life's work to people who have shown they will use guilt and intimidation to bleed their own child dry. I'm not punishing you. I'm simply refusing to reward this behavior. My dad leaned forward, his voice dropping into that sharp, dangerous tone. Do you have any idea what this makes us look like? He hissed. Do you know what people will say when they find out we lost the house and the inheritance? Florence didn't flinch. Maybe they'll finally say the truth, she replied. That you built your life on money that was never yours to begin with. Kevin looked at me, then really looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time without the script they had written for me. So that's it, he asked quietly. You just walk away and watch everything fall apart. I stood up, picking up my folder, but leaving Florence's documents on the table. No, I said, I'm walking away and letting you deal with the consequences of your own choices. There's a difference. I slid my bag over my shoulder and looked at each of them in turn. You canceled Thanksgiving. You threatened lawyers. You told the world I abandoned you while you were quietly using me to hold your life together. I did one thing. I stopped. I glanced at my grandmother, who gave me the smallest nod, the kind that says, "Go ahead. I'm right behind you." The bank will do what it's going to do, I added. If that means you have to sell the house you never should have bought, that's between you and them, not me. My mom reached for my hand, but I stepped back. My dad opened his mouth like he was about to unleash another threat, but for once, nothing came out. Florence gathered her papers and stood too. Come on, Teresa, she said. We have better things to do than sit here and argue with people who only see your value when they need your money. As we walked out of the cafe together, I could feel their eyes burning into my back. For the first time in my life, I didn't turn around to see if they were sorry. I didn't look to see if they were chasing after me. I left them sitting at that table with their cooling coffee, a stack of documents, and a future they could no longer charge to my name. In the weeks after that meeting at the cafe, everything my parents had tried to scare me with finally became real, but not in the way they expected. The first thing to go was the silence. For a little while, my phone stayed lit up with attempts to break me down the way they always had. Long texts from my mom about how she couldn't sleep, about how she never imagined her own daughter would turn her back on them. Short, angry bursts from my dad about loyalty and duty, and how no decent person would do what I had done. Kevin's messages bounced between guilt and bargaining, offering to talk to them if I would just call the bank and fix this. I answered almost none of it. I didn't block them, but I stopped treating every notification like a fire alarm. Eventually, the noise slowed. People run out of adrenaline, even when they're angry. The bank didn't. A month later, I heard from a cousin that my parents had put the house on the market. The story they told everyone was that the neighborhood taxes had gone up and they were downsizing by choice. But the details slipped out anyway. Buyers were circling, the mortgage company wasn't playing around, and my parents were suddenly very aware of what life looked like when the numbers had to work without me propping them up. The next time I drove through their suburb, just out of curiosity, I saw the for sale sign planted in the front yard they had once guarded like a castle. The big SUV my dad loved to polish in the driveway was gone too. A few weeks later, I saw a picture on Facebook of my parents in a much smaller rental apartment. The caption talked about new seasons and simplifying life, but their eyes told a different story. My dad looked 10 years older. My mom's smile didn't reach her eyes. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty either. For the first time, I felt separate, like their choices were finally sitting where they belonged, in their hands instead of in mine. Kevin reached out again, this time asking to grab coffee alone. I hesitated, then agreed, but only in a public place near my apartment where I could leave if it turned into another guilt trip. He showed up looking more tired than I had ever seen him, dark circles under his eyes, his hoodie not hiding how much weight he had lost. He told me he was delivering food 6 nights a week, trying to cover his own bills and help with our parents' new rent when he could. I kept waiting for you to swoop in, he admitted, staring into his cup. Even after everything, some part of me thought you would show up at the last second and fix it. When you didn't, it hit me that maybe we were the problem, not you. I let that sit for a minute. You were part of it, I said, not unkindly. You watched them use me and you joined in. You asked for things you knew they'd never say no to if it meant pushing the pressure onto me. That hurt. He nodded, eyes shining. I know, he said quietly. I'm not asking you to fix anything now.
I'm sorry.
I really am. For the first time, it sounded like he was. Not because the house was gone or the money was gone, but because he finally understood what it had cost me to play the role they'd written for me. I didn't tell him it was okay. It wasn't. Not yet. What I did say was, if you want to change, you can, but that has to be your work, not mine. I'm not your backup plan anymore. We talked for a while longer about his job, my work, Grandma Florence, the way everything had shifted. When we left, we hugged. Awkward but real. It wasn't a reset button. It was a first step, and I decided that was enough for now. Through all of this, my grandmother called every week. She checked in on my job, my rent, my sleep. We talked more in 2 months than we had in the previous 2 years. She told me about meetings with her lawyer, the way some relatives had tried to pry information out of her, the subtle pressure campaigns that started when word got around about her estate. She shut them down with a firmness that made me understand exactly how she had survived 28 years as a superintendent. Money brings out the truth in people, she told me once. You saw who your parents really were when they thought they owned you. Now they're seeing who you are without their strings. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for setting yourself free. At work, things got simpler too. For the first time in years, my paychecks weren't disappearing into a house I didn't live in. I paid my own rent, my own bills, and still had enough left over to build a savings account that actually grew instead of being tapped for someone else's crisis. I joined a support group for people with messy family dynamics, people who knew what it was like to love people who treated them like resources instead of relatives. Listening to their stories, I realized how common my situation actually was. The details were different, but the pattern was the same. Parents, siblings, relatives who used guilt and obligation as currency, who called it family so it would hurt more when you tried to say no. The more I spoke my story out loud, the less power it had over me. There were moments, of course, when the old programming kicked in. Holidays felt strange. My feed filled with cheerful family photos and long posts about gratitude, while my own Thanksgiving was a small dinner with a couple of friends and a FaceTime call with my grandmother from her warm little house in Florida. Sometimes I wondered if I had gone too far, if I should have given my parents one more chance, one more bailout. But then I would remember the way my dad's voice sounded on that first voicemail, confident and cold, so sure that threatening lawyers would make me crawl back into line. I would remember my mom's status painting me as the villain before anyone even knew what had happened. I would remember the messages asking for money, while they smiled from a cabin I had been deliberately cut out of, and the doubt would fade. The lesson that settled in its place was simple, but it had taken me my whole life to learn it. Family is not a free pass to violate your boundaries. Love doesn't mean letting someone drain you until there's nothing left. Helping the people you care about can be a beautiful thing, but if they're only around when they need you, if they punish you every time you stop, that's not love. That's dependency dressed up as devotion. Walking away didn't make me selfish. It made me honest with them and with myself. I stopped pretending that calling something family automatically made it healthy or safe. I stopped believing that my worth was measured by how much I could give up for other people. If you've ever felt like the designated fixer, the one who gets called only when there's a problem to solve or a bill to pay, I want you to hear this part clearly. You're allowed to stop. You're allowed to draw a line, to say no more, even if it means some people never forgive you for not being their endless supply. You might lose the version of family you were given, but you'll gain something more important, a life that belongs to you. In the end, my father did cancel Thanksgiving. He just never imagined that by doing it, he would also cancel his control over me. All it took was changing one thing they believed I would never touch, my willingness to keep paying.